Alrighty everyone, welcome back. This is Tavis Killian, your soon-to-be short-haired host, joined again by Anthony McDaniels. We've got another episode today of the Wacky World of Energy. If you're new, this is more of a fireside chat, free-form discussion, where we look at some of the headlines and do a little bit of our own extrapolation. In this segment, we really like to think for ourselves and encourage you to do the same. So don't take our word for it. All of the articles we discuss will be down in the description below, and we encourage you to form your own conclusions. And hey, if you'd like to, reach out and share them with us. You can email us at podcast@rarepetro.com for anything you might have. But as far as the content goes, we start in the international sector with a story regarding France. Now, a little bit of background, they've got a rich history of social revolt, and the latest we have is the French Parliament has been talking about raising the retirement from 62 years old to 64 years old, essentially just bumping that age up 2 years. Now, the protests have spread to rather important industry, energy, and people in LNG terminals are starting to revolt. So we've got this article here from oilprice.com, published on March 13th. We are recording March 13th, titled, "Strikes That Shut Down French LNG Terminals Are Expected to Continue." Right at the top, the strikes in France against the labor market reform have shut down the LNG import terminals, and the impact will continue to be felt this week. Now, Anthony, you originally sent this to me over Twitter, and I know you've been reading into it a little bit. What are your thoughts on the subject?
So, our ability to transport LNG over the Atlantic and the trade routes is going to be impacted by export capacity of the terminals, the tankers themselves, and import capacity. So having these kinds of strikes certainly doesn't help in trying to keep that LNG flowing, right? At the end of the day, even though France is having protests about their pension systems, and upping the age a couple of years, I think at a deeper level what it comes down to is people are just tired of the government screwing stuff up, lying to them, telling them one thing, and then moving the goalposts. And so what do? They just shut down infrastructure. There's lots of protests in Denmark as well over the farmers not wanting to deal with the new fertilizer requirements for the environmental agenda and all that special stuff that comes out of these idiots' mouths. So really what it all comes down to is their entire economy, like every modern economy, is driven by energy. And with everything that happened over the last couple of years with COVID, and then last year with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, energy prices going up, people are getting hit, especially in Europe. They're getting hit by all kinds of sides. They're getting hit by food inflation. They're getting hit by energy inflation way harder than we are here. And then to top it all off, the French government comes out and says, "Hey, I know you thought you could retire at 62, but now it's going to be later." People just snap, right?
Yep.
And the thing of it is, I don't know what calms it all down. I really don't. I do know that there's going to be a lot of. This is an example of a fundamental volatility in the energy markets, where you have a demand for Europe to bring in more LNG, but then you have volatility because of civil unrest, right? Mm-hmm. That's going to kind of shut down some of that import capacity that they have. They'll probably get it back on. It's not going to be like turning on a light, though. You got to get people. You're going to have to negotiate with the unions over there. You're going to have to calm everybody down and do this and do that. And hopefully they get back going. I mean, they're going to need the LNG, but as far as they're concerned, the government lied to me. That's what they think. I guess I can't speak for a French citizen, but if you put it all together, seems to me that that's generally what people's feeling is.
Right. Something we can be sympathetic about internationally.
Yeah. And, the halted operations at the French LNG import terminals sent the European benchmark gas price up 25% over Thursday and Friday of last week, also due to a cold snap in northwest Europe and renewed concerns about France's nuclear power fleet availability, which is struggling. On Monday, prices were down in Amsterdam trade due to higher wind generation. Yeah, that's great. Talk about volatility and energy pricing. The wind's blowing. Energy prices down. Oh, the wind's not blowing. Oh, energy prices.
Got to pin it on something. I, for
Yeah.
one, I'm excited to see how this progresses because even in this article, it says, despite the strikes and protests, the French Senate voted in favor of the proposed reform. So makes you wonder, are they just going to go, well, we tried, or will they double down? And is energy just going to
Yeah.
get, I mean, again, are we going to see new all-time highs for European energy? It's quite possible because this is not an insignificant trade hub.
Well, yeah, and it's not just LNG. I mean, they're talking about in this article the strikes across France have disrupted the power supplies, refining operations, fuel deliveries for more than a week of strikes and street protests against pension reform. So, despite these strikes and protests this weekend, the French Senate voted in favor of the proposed reform that everybody's all mad about.
Yep.
The bill has yet to clear other hurdles, and they have their own processes. The disruption at France LNG terminals is expected to last beyond March 14th, a union official told Reuters today. All the gas terminals and storages are in the hands of the strikers. Terminals are shut down. There's decline in storage. France has 4 LNG receiving terminals. I don't want to try and say those because I'm going to botch the names. And basically, it looks 3 of the 4. Yep, 3 out of their 4 import terminals have been offline since March 6th.
Yeah. Over a week now.
Yeah, yeah. Last week, deliveries to Europe and Turkey fell by nearly 19%, according to ship tracking data. So, yeah, it's not good. It's not good. I don't know. Either the French will get the citizens will get their way, or the government's going to have to become more, probably almost violent against their citizens. I saw some stuff on social media about
Street protests and the police.
yeah, they were charging people.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's a powder keg over there, and I'm sure it's just not going to get better in the next immediate future because it sounds like their government's just moving ahead. At some point, something's got to change. You can't keep those terminals offline for strikers.
No.
At some point, they could end up sending the military in if they had to, just to get those facilities running.
Yeah.
We'll see what happens.
Especially the people who are downline even. I mean, this affects more than just France.
Yeah. So how about we switch it over to our next article here on the on the international front? What do we got next, Tavis?
Well, even though this may not be resolved soon on the French side, we've got a problem that, well, it looks like we could have some new relationships blossoming nearby. This is an article from CNBC published on last Friday, which I believe was the 10th? Yes, the 10th. Titled, Arch Rivals Iran and Saudi Arabia Agree to Revive Ties, Reopen Embassies in a China-Brokered Deal. Bullets right at the top of the article. Regional foes Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to resume diplomatic relations and reopen embassies in each other's countries, both governments announced. This development follows China-led negotiations in Beijing. In addition to resuming diplomatic relations and reopening their embassies and missions in each other's countries, Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to affirm, quote, the respect for the sovereignty of states and the non-interference in international affairs of states, end quote. Now, Anthony, for those of us out there who may not be as well read on the history of international relations, what has it been like, this broken, tumultuous relationship between Saudi Arabia and Iran in the past?
Well, I'm not going to be that much of a geopolitical buff myself, but just to give the overarching context as I understand it. You see, when Saddam Hussein was taken out and Iraq was taken down, Iran and Tehran filled the power void in the Middle Eastern clusters over there. Mm-hmm. They've become the new military aggressor type country. They're trying to really get nuclear grade uranium. They're trying to get all these things going where if they want to blow somebody else up, they can. Now, given that Saudi Arabia has been an ally of the United States for decades and decades and decades, in exchange for, we provide military support for Saudi, and they trade, they mark things in U.S. dollars, things being their oil exports. You see, I'll tell you one thing. Iran is no big fan of the United States. That's not a secret. They can't stand the West at all. They hate the United States, probably second to North Korea. I mean, they just don't like this country. Well, I can tell you that was in the United States' interest to have Saudi and Iran kind of at each other's throats. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of circumstantial history and things that are even written about where, we were kind of supporting in the background some of these skirmishes that they have around them. So to have Beijing come in and essentially broker a peace deal, if you will, kind of turns that whole strategy on its head for the United States. Their foothold in the Middle East is largely Saudi Arabia now. So the biggest thing you were doing was you had Iran at Saudi Arabia's throat and vice versa. And the United States tactic was, we'll just keep saying, we don't like you, Iran, either, and we're just going to continue to supply military arms to you, Saudi, so you can protect yourselves. And now comes in Beijing and says, well, so you guys trying to just shoot at each other all the time. Why don't you just be friends? Because I'd like to be friends with both of you, and I'm big old China, so why don't you just be friends with each other, and then we can all be friends. Mm-hmm. That is pretty impactful, right? So now what you've got, a couple of weeks ago, you have Iraq coming out and saying that they will sell their oil in the yuan-denominated, gold-backed oil contract out of Shanghai, okay? And now you've got Iran and Saudi getting along is actually really not so much in the interest of the United States. Mm-hmm. It's more in the interest of China. China wants to probably keep Middle Eastern tensions at a minimum so that they have stability out of that region. Is going to provide them a lot of power. It's also going to provide a lot of the throughputs and right-of-ways and so on of Russian vessels that are leaving through the Black Sea and going through all those canals and all this over there to go around India and over to Asia. So, this is a big deal, And peace is a good thing, but everybody should understand that if you looked at the history of how the United States has dealt with these countries, it doesn't seem as if, if there's a military tension between the Middle Eastern countries, then all you got to do is supply one or two of those countries with your arms and your armaments, and then they feel like they need you. And if they feel like they need you, they'll do the things that you want them to do, like, hey, release more oil, drop the oil price because we want you to do it. Hey, don't deal with those Russians or these people because they're doing these things because we don't want you to. So doing this kind of thing, this is a chess move is what this is. Mm-hmm. Beijing very well knows that Middle Eastern tension has been, at minimum, status quo for the United States dealing with the Middle East for decades, and to some degree even to the United States' benefit, because it keeps them from working together as much as they could otherwise. But if you end up with a situation where Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq are all in lockstep, everybody else in the Middle East are going to go along, dude.
Mm-hmm. And not only just the Middle East. I mean, I like how you mentioned the chess aspect. This is strategic. It's not only Saudi Arabia and Iran. We've seen relationships blossom, especially in energy, between Russia and India. I mean, this isn't China just doing this for peace. This is a strategic laying of social engineering and groundwork to establish relationships to eventually say, hey, remember how the United States sanctioned all of us, said we couldn't develop nuclear arms? What if we kept them out of the equation? And that's sort of where I see this leading, and that ties into the petrodollar conversation we've been having on this network for years now.
Yep. Yep. I mean, in this article here, just going to pick some pieces out of it. I'm not going to read the whole thing. But Iranian state media publishes images of their Supreme National Security Council secretary with the National Security Advisor to MBS and the top Chinese diplomat. So, you know, in addition to resuming diplomatic relations and reopening their embassies, they're going to be reopening their embassies in each other's countries and missions in each other's countries. Iran and Saudi Arabia agreed to affirm, quote, the respect of sovereignty of states and non-interference in internal affairs of states. And see, that's another real key thing here. And this is what China is really playing on. It plays to their angle, and it plays to a lot of the desires and needs and wants in all of these other countries. Basically, hey, Iran, if you want to do this with your country and your citizens, that's you, man. You do you. Saudi, same thing. Okay? Russia, you know what, as far as we were concerned, we kind of consider that Ukraine was basically part of Russia the way we consider Taiwan was part of China. Right? Once they frame it up as you do what you need to do for your country, even if that's over current border lines, but in their mind, well, Taiwan is part of China, you know, and certainly Eastern Ukraine was part of Russia before. And that's what they're saying. So it's kind of like, you do what you need to do as a country. Well, the United States comes in and takes the opposite approach. No, you don't do what you think you need to do as a country. You do what we tell you you need to do as a country. And people are getting tired of that. And now you have a much larger adversary on the geopolitical stage, like China, adversary to the United States, coming and basically telling everybody, if you want to run your country like this, you run your country like that. Oh, and by the way, on top of that, we're going to invest in you. We want to build stuff. We don't buy stuff from you, and then we want to build stuff. So if you think of these countries like individuals, and you got somebody else, the big kid on the playground, is going around and saying, no, you can't do that, you can't wear that, you can't talk like that. And if that other person over there tries to get you to do it, you need to fight them, and we'll help you fight them. Now you got this other big kid on the playground coming to say, hey, if you want to talk like that, do like that, this like that, and that's you, you do you, man. And that other kid that was messing with you, I'm going to go tell him the same thing because I'm bigger than him, and he won't mess with you anymore. Oh, on top of that, oh, you like that backpack? Oh, you like that belt? How about I buy one from you? If you just give me something every now and then that you have available that I need. Now, if you just boil down all this supreme geopolitic complex web crap to that simple analogy, it becomes real easy to understand the dynamic. And that's why this whole thing, this threat to the petrodollar system, this is a real thing, guys. I've heard people who have been around this industry for a long, long time, and they're like, I'm not going to happen. China is not what China used to be, guys. You have a block of nations that are now realizing that they can do their own trade. The United States, you know what? If you want to do you, U.S., you do you. But you're not going to come over here and tell us how to do us. Okay? That's a real thing. And as while it may not be explicit in an article headline about, oh, Iran and Saudi are to get along now because China's brokering peace, that's part of this whole thing. Okay? And that needs to be understood very, very well. Because we are just any moment away from the whole Middle Eastern bloc and OPEC as a bloc saying, we'll all sell oil in yuan-based contract if it's going to China. And once that happens, the United States economic sanctions influence and all this other stuff, it just withers away. And once that happens, anything that we have to import, including energy products, can get very expensive in our currency very quickly. So these things are worth watching, and that's why we really wanted to spend some time on this during this month's Wacky World. So the White House did come out and say that they supported efforts to de-escalate tensions, because what are they going to say? No, you should be killing each other. They're not going to say that. Obviously, so if anybody's like, well, I mean, maybe the U.S. will be happy. We don't have to send troops over there. And yeah, that's all true. Except for one of the reasons that Saudi really listens to us is because we give them military support in weapons and training. And if they feel that they don't need that as much, well, guess what? Our influence over them drops, doesn't it? So what they officially say here, what do we got? National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby told CNBC during a press call, "We support any effort to de-escalate tensions in the region. We think it's in our interest, and it's something that we worked on through our own effective combination of deterrence and diplomacy." Effective, okay. My eye. Yeah, we're doing such a great job. No, you're not. Kirby added, "It really does remain to be seen if Iran is going to meet their obligations." He, meanwhile, appeared to downplay China's role in the deal. "This is not about China, and I'm not going to characterize here whatever China's role is. It appears to us that this roadmap announced today will result in multiple rounds of talks." So he kind of shot a dagger there in part of that when he said, it really does remain to be seen if Iran is going to meet their obligations. Yeah, well, he's referring to their obligations to the United States. Mm-hmm. Now, he might be trying to tell the press that if they'll stay to the obligations and staying peaceful with Saudi. But one of the big frictions, whether it's explicitly said or not, is that Saudi, in the eyes of Iran, has been a lapdog for the United States for decades, and they're tired of it. So what a great excuse to go and, mess with each other than that way. Well, if that gets taken out, to be honest with you, Iran's probably going to hold to those, at least for a while. All it takes is a couple years, everybody, and the whole dynamic shifts considerably. So, yeah. I think with that, I think we can kind of, I'll leave it off after this last bit. Michael Stevens, an associate fellow at London's Royal United Services Institute, agreed, "This is a serious moment in which the region itself and two biggest powers in the region acknowledged the influence, the diplomatic pressure, and the leverage of Beijing as their key arbiter in the region," he said, noting that this is the first such instance for China as a mediator in the Middle East. He goes on to say, "Now that doesn't mean that the U.S. is losing influence," he said, pointing to the fact that the U.S. still has a far bigger military footprint than China in the region, and its relationship with Israel is much stronger than Beijing's. "That is all well understood, and nobody is challenging the power of the U.S. and what it could do," he said. "What they are challenging is that the U.S. is leading, and it's the only game in town." Seems a little not
playground analogy.
It doesn't mean that the U.S. is losing its influence because it has a bigger military footprint in the region. What did we just talk about? They won't need as big of a military footprint if they feel there's less concern.
Precisely.
Yeah. And Israel? Yes, Israel is our ally, and they're going to be our ally probably way beyond this and all these things that have happened. Israel doesn't export oil, guys. This is all about energy. So, great. I love Israel. There's nothing wrong with Israel, but I'm telling you, this isn't about the Middle East. It's about Middle Eastern energy. Period. Full stop. It doesn't matter if we have influence in Israel, if we don't have influence in the rest of them. Well, we have influence because of our military footprint. What you mean? All that stuff we're going to have to redeploy if something blows up in the Pacific? Mm-hmm. Is that what you're talking about?
The presence that we pulled out of Afghanistan. I mean, the military presence isn't exactly what it used to be, and not a huge barter chip, but...
Yeah. So we'll see what happens. These guys can sit there and talk all they want about, it's nothing to the U.S. We're fine. Well, we are fine, but this does change some things. Now, once countries look at another country as a peace bringer, an actual peace bringer, not just, hey, let's load you up with a bunch of ammunition and go out there and you fight, but an actual peace bringer, that's a very alluring thing.
Well, with that, I think we can move it along to our last international article, this one from CNBC, published on the 3rd. So a little bit older, but still pretty important. We've got some global commentary. Persistent underinvestment in the oil sector will keep global supply tight, Aramco CEO says. Key points being larger than expected U.S. fuel stocks in recent months and expectations of a weaker global growth, I don't know why those have been made, but have helped lower energy prices. Second bullet, but as drilling activity slows in response, that decreased production will threaten supplies in the future, according to CEO of Saudi Aramco, Amin Nassar. And that second bullet point, that's pretty important to me. I've been doing the Monday Madness podcast, and we always look at the rig count. And it seems for the past few months, we've kind of stagnated in a range of 740 to 760 rigs. Before that year-over-year count, 230 more rigs than we had in 2020. 220 rigs, just huge growth because we had such an insane collapse. But now we're seeing only 83 more rigs than we had this time last year, and that number continues to decline. So I don't know if that means we're in a healthy spot for the rig count, but U.S. production is certainly not where I would expect it to be given global commodity and supply.
Yeah, no, basically the real crux here is this part, getting into the article a little bit. What the Aramco CEO says here is, I think it's very difficult if you look at the spending on the sector. It's around 370 to 400 billion. And that's globally. Currently in the upstream side. Compared to 2014, where it was 700 billion. So global CapEx spending is approximately half of what it was in 2014. Now, one could say, well, yeah, but the wells we drill now they bring a lot more oil in. This is true. But one could also say that the price to drill has gone up significantly in the last year or two because of shortage of materials, shortage of labor, all these things. Guess what? I would say, if you really looked at it high level, the productivity increase gains we've got from the wells are largely offset by the price increases of drilling and the time it takes to get everything done.
Absolutely.
And so essentially what he's saying is, in a nutshell, guys, we're spending about half on this sector globally is what we were doing about 10 years ago. Don't know if that's going to be enough to keep up with demand. And he's probably right. Now, how long this takes to show up in oil prices and inventories, I don't know. What we were talking about at the beginning of this segment with the French protests and things generally, a basket case in Europe is a basket case over there. These things do tamp energy demand for a while because all these factories aren't running, all these processes aren't running, all these things aren't running, okay? But at some point, especially if war expands, it's going to be a very energy intensive situation. I mean, basically, all the energy is going to go to China trying to build their military, if you're keeping track of that. You know, they've gone very military oriented in their last Congress placement here, and they have a huge import quota. It takes a lot of energy to build stuff. It takes a lot of energy, too, to build up a machine of war.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So,
and that's on the worst case scenario side. Even at the bottom, he says there is a need for investment, and policymakers and regulators and investors need to ensure that there's adequate available investment in this sector. But if we look at the current climate, policymakers and regulators seem to be going against this, even suggesting as much as windfall taxes for these companies that, well, like our president said, made more money than God last year. And the investors, we see a lot of activist investors pushing away, who want to see more investment into what they would consider greener forms of energy. So again, this might not hurt in the short term, but things are looking a little bit less than ideal 3, 4, 5 years out from now on the supply side.
Yeah. And people can talk about this green stuff all they want. Just ask Silicon Valley Bank how that worked out for them. I'm sick of it. These people are idiots. All right, moving on to the next article.
Domestic news. Senator Manchin threatens to block Biden nominees over IRA energy provisions. Now, this was posted on March 10th from oilprice.com. And Anthony, I'm going to have to turn this one over to you. This is the first I've heard about it today, and I'm not even sure about this infrastructure bill and energy provisions involved.
Well, it's not a long one, so we're going to read good chunks of it. So Democratic Senator Joe Manchin on Friday, and this was the Friday before our recording, so I think Friday, March 10th. We're recording on Monday, March 13th. So he threatened to hold up more of Joe Biden's nominees if the administration doesn't stick to the energy lane carved forward by the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA. In a Houston Chronicle opinion piece on Friday, Senator Manchin said that the administration would stick with implementing the IRA that was passed, not the law they wanted, but did not get. Manchin added that if they choose to continue down this path, there will be consequences now and then in the future. Manchin said he was no longer support Biden nominee for Assistant Interior Secretary for Land and Minerals Management. Laura Daniel Davis has been waiting for her confirmation since mid-2021. Republicans view Daniel Davis as decidedly anti-fossil fuels. Her chances of being confirmed now, without Manchin's support, have been labeled by some as less than zero. Manchin had previously referred to Daniel Davis as an incredibly well qualified, voting for her in his role as chair of the Energy and Resources Committee. Daniel Davis currently serves as the principal deputy assistant to Secretary of Land and Minerals Management, but Manchin has become disgruntled with the Biden administration's handling of the Alaskan energy affairs after last Friday. An internal memo was accidentally posted on the BOEM website that rejected cutting the royalty rates for oil and gas development in Alaska by the minimum amount established by the Inflation Reduction Act. Even though the BOEM's own research discovered that a discount can spark more drilling, increasing Alaska's revenues and quenching a fuel shortage in Anchorage. The memo shows that Daniel Davis signing off in November on the recommendation for higher royalty rates just 1 month before the federal oil and gas lease sale for Alaska's Cook's Inlet. The lease sale drew just one bid for a single lease.
I bet you it was a good bid.
Yeah, it's basically like, hey, you know what? We'll do this Inflation Reduction Act, this is what Manchin's saying, but we need to still continue to use our conventional energy sources and look for them, coal, oil, gas, these things. And he was under the impression that they would do a lease sale in Alaska, the Cook Inlet. And basically what they did is, yeah, we'll do a lease sale. They just had this high royalty rate, so they knew nobody'd be interested. One party was interested in one lease. It basically defeats the whole purpose.
Yep.
Yeah, we'll put the car on the lot for sale, but let's jack up the price so like nobody wants to do it. And if anybody does, they'll get a piece. They won't get the whole thing. Such a joke. Such a joke.
I mean, that's been the ultimate conclusion once we review domestic energy policy as of late, but a joke indeed.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of tension and turmoil within Washington, D.C., too, about all this stuff. Everybody gets all wrapped up about what we have to do for the climate. I just find that to be just a bunch of crap. That has nothing to do with the climate. Absolutely zero to do with the climate. They don't care. All they care about is doing their agendas because it lines their pockets. I've come to the point in my career, in my life, that's all I see, and that's it. Draw your own freaking conclusion. But if you look at the track record of these idiots flying on their private jets everywhere, like Kerry, the climate envoy, taking a private jet everywhere, all these climate global leaders taking jets, having mansions, living on the freaking beach, and telling you, watch your carbon footprint. Be worried about rising sea levels. Bullshit.
Yeah. As if you and I are the problem and not these people consuming these mass quantities of resources.
I think it's a bunch of elitist idiots that think we're bigger idiots than they are. And I think people need to start talking more about this. We'll move to the next article. I'll kick this one off. Another absolute mental Energy Secretary Granholm claims the U.S. can learn from what China is doing on climate change. Wow. You know, she reminds me of the girl who isn't a girl. She's kind of almost like an adult. And she goes to the circus and she sees this trick and she goes, "Oh my God, that's so amazing." You're an idiot. Like that should intrigue you if you're 5, not if you're 15. Is there some mental dysfunction in your head? She thinks that China is doing all these great things on climate change. No, you idiot. What they're doing on climate change is they're selling you battery pack solar panels and wind turbines. That's what they're doing on climate change. Are they opening more wind, solar, and all these things in China? Well, of course they are, because they're building it. So let's put it up here. Let's put it up there. They don't care about private property. It doesn't freaking exist over there. Do you know what else they're doing? Opening a crap load of coal fire plants.
Exactly.
So, this is just, she's an idiot. She's an idiot. Most of the people in administration are idiots. They're all a joke. She doesn't even know how much oil we produce every day in this country or use.
Yeah, she was asked in an interview,
Energy
right?
Secretary. Energy Secretary. Totally unqualified. Totally unqualified. Absolute moron. She praised China for being very sensitive to world climate needs, investing in clean energy. Investing. They're also investing in coal-fired plants, you moron.
And that was what confused me the most. Her quote of, "I think China's has been very sensitive and has actually invested a lot in their solutions to achieve climate goals." Well, outside of the industrial benefits and economic benefits we talked about selling it to the rest of the world, as far as I can see, they've penned their name down some places. They've said, "Oh, yeah, we'll get there by 2050. But I do not see a lot of effort going into actually transitioning away from cheap, abundant energy, which they spent the last 3 years hoarding.
Yeah, of course she's claiming their country is more sensitive to the issue, more so than the U.S. Well, because they want to sell us battery packs and solar panels. Here's some numbers for you. According to the U.S. Energy Information Administration, 55% of China's energy now comes from coal, compared to 11% in the U.S. China also
just coal.
Just coal. The United States is the only developed country that has meaningfully reduced its carbon emissions. Why? Because we shifted from coal to natural gas. Why? Because we had the freedom for exploration and development of said resources. Period. Full stop. End of story. Climate sensitive? You idiot. Have you seen photos and videos of this sewage that comes out of the chemical refining processes to make these motors for the electric cars, to make these lithium-ion battery packs, to make those pedestals and these other things for the wind turbines? It's an ecological disaster.
No, but they're
absolute. It's just a joke. And she says they're more sensitive. Well, yeah, because they want us to buy their crap.
Because they make money off of sensitivity.
I mean, these people are freaking idiots. And China's over there like, guys, you should really care about your Green New Deal, you know? You should really want more solar and wind, you know? Yeah, you should. I mean, China isn't even holding themselves to the Paris Accord. Come on. Yeah. Maybe she's thinking that she'll have a place in case, you know, she needs to flee to China or something. Maybe we should investigate her as being an agent of the Chinese Communist Party for saying that they're so sensitive. Sensitive? They're just opening a new coal plant like every other week. They're selling us a bunch of crap that has no emissions, but don't worry about all this sewage that we just put into the environment to make these things. Just a freaking joke.
Yeah, but hey, that's why we record these segments. We love doing the Wacky World because a lot of the people information get is just from gleaning a headline and looking at the surface level and thinking, oh, well, China, they're environmentally sensitive because they like solar panels, and not thinking, oh, it's because they sell the solar panels to every other developed country with aggressive climate goals. We encourage you to look into those articles we've linked because, I mean, there's There's lots of news out there. We even publish it to Rare Petro, not only our own stuff, but some of our favorite sources. We encourage you to check those out. Anything else you want to say before we close this out, Anthony? Because really, you got to think for yourselves, folks.
Yeah, no, I think that's enough. That's enough ranting for this month.
Ranting indeed. Well, if you enjoyed it, be sure to frack that follow button. We've got lots of other content coming out. If it's not the Wacky World, Monday Madness. We're actually recording this on a Monday. I'll be putting out an episode later regarding some more, well, we'll say based in statistics and numbers, some information there and current events, especially in the United States. Otherwise, we got the Thirsty Thursday periodical looking at domestic supply. Plenty of great content. Encourage you to go to www.rarepetro.com to check it out. But this has been Tavis Killian and Anthony McDaniels with Rare Petro. And until we see you next time, take care, everybody.
Thanks, Tavis.